What is going on, guys? We are back again with another episode of Sloppy Saturdays. And today we have a little bit of a mini pod going over the recent updates on Brendan Sorsby's case. He's going to court with this gambling thing that we all talked about plenty of times here. We are going to talk about how this injunction, if it actually has life to it, or if it's just like a Hail Mary type of thing. We're going to talk about everything involved. We're going to talk about Texas Tech. We're going to talk about Brendan Sorsby and his team, all the possibilities. We're going to talk about the judge and his background. We're going to talk about everything, why this is happening, give you guys all the information we possibly have on it, and our predictions on what's going to happen. So everybody knows Brendan Sorsby bet on games when he was at Indiana. Now, he released statements just recently saying that he did it to feel closer to the team and that all the bets basically lost anyway because of how bad of a program Indiana was at that point. Now, all that stuff is Hail Mary quotes. I thought it really just sounds silly, stuff that just didn't need to be said. When you look at this case now, Brendan Sorsby and his team are going at this case from a mental health standpoint. We all know how important mental health is without a doubt. But I think the fact of the matter is Brendan Sorsby knew that you cannot bet on sports as an NCAA athlete, on any sports. But why I believe this case really has no chance is because you definitely can't bet inside your own organization program where you have intel, where you're there day to day, every single day. Like maybe this case would have a little bit more life if you just bet on the NFL, a different league. Then you could say, hey, like it really had no impact on anything within the organization. But to be betting on your own program absolutely can happen. And like I said, they're smart in the route they're taking because gambling disorder is a mental health illness without a doubt. And it is an addiction. But the rules are the rules. You can't bet at all as an NCAA athlete, let alone on your own program. Why I also believe this is different from previous cases, because if you guys remember, we had a John Mateer case last year where he was betting on the NCAA as well. Why I believe this is so different than John Mateer's case is because when we saw John Mateer, he was betting on either an offshore book or with his buddies. We saw Venmo transactions saying the games and everything, but there was no actual documented proof from any sites that he was gambling on the NCAA. Now, was it clear and obvious he was? Yes, but they didn't have the documentation. With this Brendan Sorsby case, there's clear documentation on gambling apps that the NCAA found. So the proof is already there. That's why I believe this is such a long shot. When you look at Brendan Sorsby and his team, I really do believe this is just a Hail Mary attempt to possibly get back in the NCAA. We all know how much money he's going to lose going into the supplemental draft. And we all know like this was a huge opportunity for a college football playoffs to possibly make him in a first rounder. So he's not only losing the money right now, he's losing long-term money as well. So I think it's a Hail Mary attempt. And the main thing they said that they want to figure out throughout this case, if there's any chance Brendan Sorsby is able to play in this season, or if not, they want this case to be done by the supplemental draft. Because we talk about timelines with cases very similar like we talked about the Trinidad Chambliss case. It is very important that there is a ruling at a certain time because there cannot be any case where Brendan Sorsby doesn't get his NCAA eligibility and the supplemental draft passes. He cannot take a year off of live action football. That cannot happen. So I do think there is going to be a ruling before that. And I think there is no chance that Brendan Sorsby gets this case done. Now, the only counter argument on why Brendan Sorsby may have a chance, like we said, we talked about the mental health thing. I still don't think that's going to be an excuse because, again, he is technically committing like a crime betting within his own organization with intel. But why people believe there may be a chance is because very similar with the Trinidad Chambliss case, this judge is a huge Texas Tech alum, and he's a massive Texas Tech fan. All the images came out with him at games, him with the mascot. So a lot of people believe that that may be the chance that will give Brendan Sorsby an opportunity in the NCAA again, but I just don't see that at all. Like, this judge has a job, and there is no amount of excuses, reasonings that could make this right. Like, I believe 100% Brendan Sorsby is going to go into the supplemental draft. Now, the other thing that is very interesting with this case is that Texas Tech will reinstate Brendan Sorsby. They said this, like, if Brendan Sorsby does get his NCAA eligibility, Texas Tech is pretty much going to welcome him back with open arms. Now, why I believe this is the case, I think if it was a different program like an Ohio State or like in Alabama, where you have two possibly starting quarterbacks in your room, they wouldn't bring him back. But for Texas Tech, in such a pivotal year where they were supposed to go all in with NIL and the transfer portal and be a true college football playoff contender when they haven't been that in a long time, they want to keep that window alive, and they will welcome Brendan Sorsby with open arms because there is possibly nothing else in that room that can compensate him at that quarterback spot. So I do get it for Texas Tech. Like, you're kind of in a bind. You had a really good season last year where you made the college football playoffs. You were supposed to take that next step for years to come into a college football playoff contender, and you don't believe you have anything in that room like Brendan Sorsby. I understand why you want him reinstated, even though with everything going on, you want to keep your program in a college football playoff standpoint, in a contender standpoint, and Brendan Sorsby right now is your only hope of doing that. So I do get it from that sense. Like I said, I do like Will Hammond a lot. I like Will Hammond and what we saw with limited action. But again, he had a massive injury. He might not even be ready by week 1. And again, him where Brendan Sorsby is, again, there is a gap there. You definitely feel way more confident with Brendan Sorsby. Also, another thing with Texas Tech that we're discussing now, I do believe that there will be outs in that. Like, Brendan Sorsby's deal is worth up to $5 million. I think if he does not get the eligibility to play this season, there is going to be outs. There's no way that he's going to get paid $5 million, and that's fully guaranteed. But I do think if he does get this eligibility, Texas Tech welcomes him back with open arms. Like I said, this isn't a program where you have 2-3 starting quarterbacks in the room that could take you to a college football playoffs and give you national championship hopes. Like, they went all in with Brendan Sorsby. Like I said in other podcasts going over this, like, it's just unfortunate for them. They could have chose, like, to really pursue a Sam Levitt or a Darian Mensah or whoever, but they just chose the wrong quarterback in the sense of this outside thing that nobody could have predicted. So, yeah, it's tough for Texas Tech and their window. And again, for teams that aren't Ohio States or Alabamas or Georgias, like we saw this with Penn State, and we saw this with Texas Tech, and we saw this with Clemson. Like, you want to stay in this window and have this notion that you're this perennial college football playoff team for as long as possible. If Brendan Sorsby doesn't play and you don't win the Big 12 and you're not in the college football playoffs, then you're going to look at the next transfer portal cycle, and the hype at your program isn't going to necessarily be there. So it's very big for Texas Tech that you want to stay in this window. Like I said, that's why even with the outside noise, they would welcome him back with open arms. But I do think Texas Tech, even without Brendan Sorsby, is possibly the biggest contender in the Big 12 still, with everything they've done to build that program. I just don't think without Brendan Sorsby, this is going to be a national championship hopeful team. The other thing I do want to discuss to wrap up this video, why I believe this case really has no chance. Like, this is a complete violation, and there's all the proof to it. I want to talk about Brendan Sorsby in the supplemental draft. Now, I have a dedicated episode going over that, but I just want to discuss the recent noise around it. Like, a lot of people are to believe that the teams that are going after Brendan Sorsby are teams that really need quarterbacks, and teams that we're going to go all in on the 2027 draft class on a first-round quarterback. Like, people think it's going to be the Browns and the Jets and whatever. I said that I believe it should be teams that maybe have an older quarterback that won't pick as high in the next couple of years, that need a plan for the future. That's where I believe teams should be going with supplemental draft. But now you're seeing things like, again, it could be the Jets, and the Jets can maybe find something in him there and not go in the 2027 draft class. I think if you're a team where your outlook is going to be bad this season and you were planning for the 2027 draft class, I think you should stick to planning for that. I don't think there's any way, if you're supposed to be a top 5 team in this 2027 class, like a top 5 pick team, I don't think you should be going after Brendan Sorsby with a second or third round pick. Again, I think Brendan Sorsby's value has to drop a little bit with all his concerns with gambling. Like, gambling is an addiction. Who knows, he's not going to do this in the NFL. These are character concerns. I think you should go for this great draft class if you have a top 5 pick outlook. And like I said, I think you should be using a third or fourth round pick on Brendan Sorsby if you're one of these teams like a Lions or like a Minnesota Vikings, where you do possibly have a quarterback concern in the future and you're not going to have the pick to pick that high. But if you're a team like the Jets or like the Browns or these teams that could possibly be top 5 teams in the 2027 draft class, you should not be going for a Brendan Sorsby, in my opinion. You also should not be investing a second-round pick in Brendan Sorsby or a first-round pick. Obviously, it's not going to be a first-round pick, but I'm hearing a lot of things that it could be a second-round pick. A team might bid that high for Brendan Sorsby. I understand Brendan Sorsby has everything you want in a quarterback, and this was a guy that was supposed to be a first-round pick, at worst a second-round pick. But now with these concerns, it has to be a third, and even a third to me is pretty high. Like, again, he's not going to, if he enters the supplemental draft, he's not going to spend his last year developing in college football. And like I said, with everything going on with him, his value has to dip a little bit. Like I said, if you're a team that is going to be bad this season and you were stocking up for the 2027 QB class, I think you should remain to do so. I don't think you should be spending a second or third round pick on Brendan Sorsby. But if you're a team that has quarterback concerns in the future and you're not going to be able to pick that high, that's where you should go with that third round pick for Brendan Sorsby. But to wrap up this little micropod, like I said, Brendan Sorsby, in my opinion, this court case, it's a Hail Mary. All the evidence is against him. He completely violated the NCAA rules. I don't see basically any way that he has NCAA eligibility this season. I think this is kind of smoke. I think this is a Hail Mary attempt before the supplemental draft to possibly just take a shot because they can to give him this NCAA eligibility. But in my opinion, it's not going to happen. And like I said, those are my thoughts on the supplemental draft. What teams should really go in on Brendan Sorsby? That wraps up the episode of Sloppy Saturdays. Drop down below if you like this constant coverage on this Brendan Sorsby case. Obviously, it is massive for the whole NCAA. Like, you're looking at a true contender in Texas Tech, possibly dipping into just a college football playoff team or not even making the college football playoffs at all. And for Brendan Sorsby, obviously, we know how massive it is. A lot of money at stake and his future at stake. That wraps up this episode, and we are